3 Lives 3 Worlds. The Pillow Book. Lower volume. Original work by Tangqi Gongzi. English translation, Hamster 428. English editing, rockharlequin, Lily, JoannaKuang. Part 4 The Shadow's Souls. Chapter 16. The second prince of the Sui family, Syegoku, was known to be quixotic his entire life. Although he had been hurt in Aranya's tale, he still retained a certain poise and grace. It was both sad and pitiful, amassing him praise from many for being a rare gentleman. Syegoku had always thought that he was only a bystander in Aranya's love story, a small unfortunate role who happened to be hurt by love. But after viewing the Miehua glass, Chen Ye as the protagonist would take the cake if they were to speak of heartache. Furthermore, the many injuries Chen Ye was afflicted with were given to him by this very bystander. This route wasn't something he could have expected. But whatever the case was, this was an answer. He had pursued this matter for more than 200 years simply to seek for an answer, yet the truth was like this. His love and pain for a moment seemed as though they had never been entrusted to anyone. But in the end, this was still an answer. Mo Xiao felt ashamed for having been blind and deaf. He never expected that Chen Ye and Aranya's past would be like this, nor that Chen Ye would create such a realistic Aranya's dream. Both were enough to make him shocked. Then when the third unexpected thing was revealed to him, not only was he shocked, he was also made to ponder the unfairness in life. The third matter had nothing to do with Mo Xiao. Rather, it was largely related to His Majesty the King. At this time, the Miehua glass was showing the image of Chen Ye slashing 3 of Fanyan Valley's seasons with a swing of his sword, exhausting his cultivation to create Aranya's dream under Zai's guidance. The second prince unconsciously raised his hand and was bound to the glass frame, forced to share Chen Ye's emotional turmoils. In his haziness, he heard Daijun slowly say, "Come back and let me have a look." It was true that he was lured by Chen Ye's life within the mirror, but he really didn't know how to come back either. Daijun seemed to also know this. It was just that he had always been used to commanding others. He watched his useless appearance pensively for a moment, then drew a few lines onto a piece of paper and dropped it into the mirror. The glass surface instantly rippled like spring waves. The image within the mirror gradually vanished behind the ripples. Syegoku's right hand was suddenly freed from the frame. When he looked into the mirror again, the ripples had calmed down, but auspicious clouds and celestial cranes from heaven were now beginning to emerge on its surface. Syegoku said in bewilderment, "This is..." Daijun propped his cheek and watched the mirror as he lightly replied, 300 years ago." Syegoku swept his eyes across the familiar pavilions and palaces in the mirror as he became more bewildered. "We were watching Chen Ye's life from 300 years ago, but why is the mirror showing heaven?" Daijun turned the cup in his palm and pondered. "If I'm not mistaken," he paused mid-sentence. Daijun rarely pondered. More rarely still did he hesitate. This was because pondering and hesitance both represented a kind of uncertainty, and Daijun wasn't usually unsure about something. Syegoku glanced up, surprised to find a building looming within involute clouds in the looking glass. 4 pillars and a high old beam opened up to a wide spacious room. But there was nothing inside this room. The only noticeable thing was a large cloud bed. It seemed a figure was lying on the hazy bed. As the image in the mirror slightly zoomed in, Syegoku perspired cold sweat. Lying on the bed of clouds was a purple-robed silver-haired deity. Who else could he be but Donghua Daijun? Nevertheless, when he glanced to the living Daijun sitting beside him, His Majesty was still turning the cup in his palm. There was a calmness in his expression as he watched the mirror as if he had seen this coming. Soon after, there came some movement in front of the cloud bed. A solemnly dressed young officer neared the cloud bed. He solemnly exchanged the decorative flower vase at the headboard, solemnly lit the incense burner in front of the wall screen, and then solemnly rearranged the corner of the quilt for the sleeping king. As he finished straightening the quilt, an elderly fairy came in. Because the young officer and the older fairy were donning daily clothes, one could not tell their ranks from their outfits. The grey-bearded elderly fairy bowed deferentially to the solemn young officer and said, "Lord Zonglin, may I ask why you have called for me so urgently?" Zonglin Sumoy had heard of this name before. Rumors had it Daijun appointed this fairy to oversee the palace's affairs when he retired to Taichan Palace. Zonglin Xianguan was Daijun's most faithful retainer. His meticulousness and prudence were known throughout the lands. For tens of thousands of years, he had been a model to all other attendants in Zhuangdian. Zonglin Xianguan knitted his brow and said, "Elder Yunzhuang, I've invited you here for a crucial matter. Daijun is now asleep because of the subduing of the Miao Huiming realm. You and I both know he had forbidden this matter to spread outside the palace, lest it gives rise to unrest in the 6 realms. Speaking of which, also thanks to your help, Siming Xingjun changed a few lines in the Mortal's Book of Fate a few days ago before we were able to deceive the other immortals. Purporting that Daijun was seeking to experience mortal illness and death, hatred and resentment, love and parting. His skandhas had been burning with interest in the 8 bitterness of a mortal's life and he had left to reincarnate. Daijun went to sleep so suddenly. Though he did not leave any subsequent command, there is recently a thought that has been making me ill at ease." Elder Yunzhuang stepped closer. "Dare I ask what is disturbing you so?" He was indeed a courtier from Taichan Palace. He went straight to the problem instead of beating around the bush like the rest of Zhuangdian. Zonglin sighed. Even though Daijun had subjugated the Miao Huiming realm and locked up Mialuo, if it's known that Daijun went to sleep for this, even if Mialuo has been confined, I'm afraid she will suddenly wreak some sort of havoc. To protect Daijun's 100-year sleep from a reappearance of Mialuo's scourge, I gave some thought and recently found an answer. Elder, you are very good at creating souls. If you can take half of Daijun's shadow to make a soul and send it to Fanyan Valley. Of course, when this soul is born, he won't know that he's Daijun's shadow or that he is shouldering the great responsibility of guarding the Huiming realm. Still, this soul ultimately has a trace of Daijun's breath. As long as he is reborn in Fanyan Valley, he will be a deterrent to Miao Luo. Furthermore, a Bianiao's lifespan is finite. Once turned to dust, the incarnated soul will naturally return as Daijun's shadow. As far as Daijun is concerned, there is really nothing to worry about later on. After a length of silence, Elder Yunzhuang pondered aloud, Lord, you've considered everything so thoroughly. This old man was also just thinking for a moment that this is the only viable method. But in my humble opinion, after I make this soul and send it to Fanyan Valley, you and I both need to drink amnesiac water to forget this matter. Since you've always been meticulous, I assume you'll also agree with this old man. albeit this reincarnated soul is said to only be a fraction of Daijun's shadow, it is still a part of His Majesty. If either of us inadvertently reveal the matter, a determined person could very well give us trouble by devouring this soul. Daijun will be weak during his sleep, and hence his immortal foundation will certainly be affected. Zonglin nodded, "You're right." The scene in the glass quietly faded out after Zonglin showed the elderly fairy out of the room. Undulating clouds, endless rooftops, all seemed to be dissolving in water. The Miuhua glass stood in front of them just like any ordinary glass again. Among the new generation of immortals, Mo Shao had always thought of himself as being unruffled and cool. But by some unknown luck, things beyond his expectations kept coming at him one after another today, making him feel quite overwhelmed. After what was shown in front of his eyes arrived, he couldn't be unaffected anymore. He didn't know what the heck Miaoihuiming realm was. But throwing this aside, he understood perfectly well the conversation inside the mirror between Zonglin and Yun Zhuang. They said Chen Ye was no other than Daijun's shadow. Chen Ye was actually Daijun's shadow? Being struck by lightning in broad daylight still could not describe Mo Shao's feelings at this time. But if he were to say struck by lightning, at this time in front of the mirror, there should be someone who was struck even worse. He couldn't help but look to Daijun. Yet Daijun, who should be struck worse, was still calm and cool. His graceful demeanor while pouring tea was also just as before. When he first entered this world, Dong Hua never actually thought that Chen Ye could be his own shadow. There had been times when he felt that the Archmage's breath was somewhat familiar, but because he was too lazy to bother, he haphazardly attributed it to two peoples practicing the same magic as an excuse to not pursue the matter any further. There weren't many occasions when he actually used his brain, and so his brain had always been a bit rusty. He didn't start to doubt whether Chen Ye had anything to do with him until he saw through the Miuhua glass the strength that could destroy heaven and earth. That destructive mysterious light was originally his most advantageous sorcery. In retrospect, his guess wasn't wrong. Sure enough, he and Chen Ye did share a certain origin. But this origin wasn't that difficult to accept either. A shadow, that was all that it was. Knowing Chen Ye was his own shadow wasn't anywhere as surprising as the day he saw that it was an earth fairy that was using creation sorcery. Today explained about how an earth fairy could use creation sorcery. After all, it was his own shadow, wasn't it? He hadn't considered that there would be a shadow and didn't plan thoroughly enough. If Chen Ye was his shadow, then Xiao Bai and Aranya. He raised the brush, ready to paint Aranya's image to drop into the calmed Miuhua glass when wind and thunder all of a sudden sounded outside the window. He looked up to see ominous clouds pulling in, seemingly from the imperial city. The teacup clattered on the table. The Miuhua glass was abruptly stored away inside his sleeve. He got up and hasted to the imperial city. Su Moi also looked out the window amid the rising winds and thunder. "This thundering sounds a little strange," he said. A gust of wind later, he saw that Daijun had urgently departed the room. After so many days of following Daijun, he had never seen him so concerned. He was curious, but there wasn't enough time to hesitate. He also needed to catch up. Menacing blasts picked up. Dong Hua sailed on winds and landed outside Boxin Pavilion at Aranya's princess estate in the imperial city. At this time, he saw Chen Ye leisurely carrying Fengju onto a chaise inside the pavilion. The mage had barely touched the lady's jade arms when a long sword had stopped his erring hands just in time. And just like that, the seemingly sleeping Fengju had steadily lain in Dong Hua's arms. Syemoku slowly headed down from the clouds as he inwardly marveled at the king's quickness. The Kanghe blade drilled into a pavilion column at Chen Yi's eye level. In the past, Daijun froze this world's eyes in the Biao cave behind Qinan Mountain after deciding he would be using his identity. Afterward, he began to wholeheartedly play Zai's role. Admittedly, Lord Zai's original looks and personality were neither of great concerns to him. There was just one thing he had to be careful with whenever he drew his sword: he must take care to hide the famous Kanghe's true appearance lest people recognize his identity through the recognition of his sword. And yet at this time, that renowned Kanghe sword was piercing so imposingly and blatantly under Chen Yi's very eyes. The zircon on its hilt flashed numerous beams which seeped into the afternoon sunlight inside the pavilion. It was simply blinding. Syemoku was convinced that if it hadn't been for the Kanghe sword's prevention, Chen Yi would have fought back to recapture Fengju. However, the Kanghe was worthy of its fame. Once it made its appearance, it had subdued the madness in the mage's eyes. After a brief silence, they heard Chen Yi slowly speak, "The Kanghe." Now that he recognized the Kanghe, how could he not recognize the venerated deity in front of him? The mage was indeed intelligent. He looked up to Daijun again, his expression carrying some uncertainties. "I am greatly honored that your grace has come to this world. However, I'm not sure what virtues I possess for you to deign to come here. Are you concerned with my private affairs?" One couldn't see what sort of expression Daijun held as he faced his own shadow. Slightly casting his eyes over the empty glass bottle on the stone table, he said to Chen Yi, "It seems you have collected the essences needed to make another soul for Aranya. Have you placed all of them into Xiao Bai's body?" Syemoku glanced at Fengju, who was lying in Daijun's arms. Since His Majesty's words were quite calm, it seemed there was no major concern with Her Highness's body. "Indeed, nothing in this world can escape from your eyes," said Chen Yi after a long silence. "Although I do not know why you are currently here, the woman in your arms is the one person in this world I cannot let go of. I hope your grace can show leniency and give her back to me." Dong Hua sat down on the chaise next to the stone table, letting the sleeping Fengju fall into his chest. Wrapping one hand around her, he slightly gazed up and said, "She is mine. Why should I give her to you?" Chen Yi startlingly looked up. Dong Hua gently brushed his free hand, removing the correction spell on Fengju's body. He lightly spoke, "Xiao Bai fell into this world. The Aranya that was created by you was replaced by her." Looking at the shocked expression on Chen Yi's face, he lightly spoke again, "Zai Shenjun of the previous generation was indeed a master. If Aranya was just a Bianiao, this sorcery he taught you to resurrect her would still be possible, albeit sacrilegious. But Aranya was just a soul formed from a shadow. She only had one life in the first place. After her life ended, she should return to smoke and dust. No matter how you collected her life essences, you still won't be able to create another soul. No matter what you do, you won't be able to revive her. She won't be coming back." The jasper flute in Syemoku's hands clattered onto the ground. Chen Yi said dazedly, "What are you saying?" The Miuhua glass from Daijun's sleeves was again brought to the sunlight, erecting on the stone table. Dong Hua was still holding Fengju in his arms as he calmly raised his hand to conjure a brush and paper from thin air. He sketched a small picture of Aranya, then wrote a few words next to it and tossed the paper into the mirror and said, "Why was she born as a shadow? I am also a little curious. Let's take a look." Previously, when they were taking a peek into Chen Yi's life, the first thing that had appeared was his birth. Presently, it was a school that was shown in the Miaohua glass. Just outside the school, several fairy birds and animals were playing on the green hillside. From the classroom came a reading voice. The passage was from the Prajna Sutra. As the sun shifted, the reading gradually lowered, seemingly bringing class to an end. Soon after, an elderly immortal sporting a goatee carried his books and walked out of the school. One after another, students filed out to the hillside and mounted onto their riding animals, flying away from the mountain in groups of 2 or 3. Slowly coming out last, with quite a few handsome boys surrounding her, was a young girl in red. Her hair was as black as ink and as luscious as clouds. Her eyebrows arched like a pair of crescent moons. On her forehead was a scarlet phoenix feather blossom. Her eyes were stars, her lips cherry. In her expression was an impatience. This was Her Highness Fengju of King Kaiu. "Is this also 300 years ago?" asked Su Moi. Daijun kept his steady gaze fixed on Fengju from within the looking glass. 295 years ago, a bit before Aranya was born. To say that Aranya might have been Fengju's shadow was only Daijun's guess. But when he dropped Aranya's picture into the Miaohua glass and Fengju appeared on its surface, it became quite apparent. As he expected, Aranya's soul was verily made from Xiaobai's shadow. But why did Xiaobai also send her shadow to reincarnate in Fanyan Valley? At the same time, she did not seem to know that Aranya was her own shadow. This was giving Daijun thoughts. Inside the mirror, the boys tailing Fengju were gradually approaching. The closest 3 who were smothering her were wearing a blue robe, a white robe, and a green robe each respectively. From how they were dressed, they did not seem to be fairies from King Kaiu, but rather like young men from the heavenly clan. When voices were heard from the Miaohua glass, it was the blue-robed boy's turn. He seemed the romantic sort. Full of unspoken feelings, he gazed toward Fengju and said, "I've long heard that King Kaiu is a blessed magical land. I've been meaning to take a tour during my time studying here. It just so happened I met Baiji Daijun a few days ago. His Majesty said Your Highness is very familiar with the local sites. After today, we will be having 10 days of break. I wonder if Your Highness can spare some time to accompany me on a tour around King Kaiu." Fengju weathered the lad's meaningful eyes and said, "I." The green-robed boy elbowed the blue-robed boy aside. He looked at Fengju with earnest sparkling eyes. "One day is more than enough for sightseeing. I've heard of Your Highness's amazing culinary skill. On our break, why don't you come with me to the mortal realm for drinks? I have quite a few favorite restaurants I'd like to show to you. There are some dishes even heaven does not have. Surely, Your Highness must be interested." Fengju weathered the lad's burning eyes. "I." The white-robed boy pulled the green-robed and blue-robed boys behind him. His eyes contained the melancholy of an autumn lake. He said to Fengju, "Eating and drinking are frivolous activities, after all. I heard Your Highness is quite accomplished in magical weaponry and ancient history. Unfortunately, these are my worst two subjects. Would your highness be able to spare some time during the break to help me improve in them? Fengju weathered the lad's autumn water eyes. The three boys' eyes were filled with expectations. Fengju weathered their expectant eyes and turned around to pull forward a sleepy lad. She said to him, Are there any plans for the break after today? The sleepy boy rubbed his eyes, took a small notebook from his sleeve, turned a few pages, yawned and said, Your Highness has many plans. Baiji Daijun has ordered that before noon, Your Highness is to visit and ask after his three lordships' injuries. Oh, they're the three lords who invited you out to play on the last 10-day break, whose leg you broke, whose hand you fractured, and whose neck you injured. In the afternoon, let me see, Your Highness will need to hurry to Mount Zonghu to duel with Lady Xiao. This is a death match, so basically Your Highness is only free in the evening. The blue-robed boy, green-robed boy, and white-robed boy stood frozen like statues. Fengju blankly closed the notebook for the sleepy boy, then turned in front of the other three and kindly said, The duel with Lady Xiao isn't quite as serious as a death match. It's just a matter of severing one of her limbs or two. I might be able to finish the fight and come back around the hour of the rooster, 5 to 7 p.m. Gentlemen, which one of you will wait for me? The three boys glanced at each other in horror and ran for the hills, momentarily forgetting to even lead their riding animals away. They were slipping away even faster than rabbits. Daijun's torch-like eyes paused on the glass surface, a curve slightly twitched on his lips. It was now getting late inside the mirror. The sleepy boy glanced to Fengju, conjured a brush out of thin air, reopened the small notebook in his hand, licked the tip of the brush and scratched out a few names on top. 3 more scared off, he remarked. Although your family is slightly rushing your marriage, there's no need to scare them like this. Though you don't have any intention right now, what if you want to get married in the future? You may need them then. Fengju rubbed her brow and changed the subjects. I don't have a riding animal. Grey Wolf Diddy, you don't have one either. Little Uncle's riding animal, Bafang, seems to have some business today and won't have time to pick us up. Do you think we should call for a cloud or walk down the mountain? The sleepy boy closed the small notebook and pointed to the horizon. Hey, what is that clump of auspicious cloud? Fengju's gaze followed his finger to the distance where she didn't see any auspicious cloud. It was only the horizon dyed by the sunset glow into a golden strand. But a few clumps of thick clouds were indeed pulling in. Although Daijun had altered the Miehua glass to show the past and present lives of earth fairies, Sumoy didn't expect it to show the past lifetime of a King Kaihu goddess. If it could, then this past must somehow be related to Aranya's life. He didn't see any relationship between the scene just now and Aranya, but by the time the thick clouds within the glass landed and dispersed, he came to understand why the Miehua glass would show this school. The deity who landed in front of Fengju and Grey Wolf Diddy was the lord of the underworld, Syegoku. As they were also spiritual things, the lives of mortals concerned 3 deities. The first was Lord of the Northern Star, the second was Lord of the Southern Star, and the third was the Master of the Underworld, Lord Goku. The Southern Star oversaw birth, the Northern Star oversaw death, and the Underworld was in charge of post-mortem judgment as well as reincarnation. Lord Goku was as solitary as his name. He roamed alone and was perennially secluded in the underworld, rarely keeping in touch with other immortals. Each year, one could only see this deity during Tianjun's court. In Sumoi's impression, every time they met, this deity always looked dignified. At this time, Lord Goku, who stood in front of Fengju, looked almost sickly. After asking her to dismiss Grey Wolf Diddy beside her, he pointed to the rugged mountainous road ahead and said, "King Kaihu's evening scene isn't bad. Let's take a walk along this road." Fengju followed behind Syegoku. Now that the students had all gone home, the mountain was drowned in silence. As birds flew home, there was an occasional cawing above their heads. The two looked around and chose to sit underneath a wishing tree. Syegoku removed a hip flask from his waist, took a swig and said, "There is something I think I should let you know." Fengju laughed. "Is it my late gift of wine?" "This, you can be assured. You and I are friends. Since I've promised to send you a jar of Jian's peach wine, I won't ever go back on my words. It's just that, well, recently Jian and my little uncle are having a row. Even for me, it's not very good timing." Syegoku cut her train of thoughts. "It's Donghua Daijun's matter." Fengju's smile stiffened on her face. "No one in the world must know this," said Syegoku. "I imagine Lord of the Northern Star has not noticed it either. Perhaps because I am in charge of reincarnation, I've just now found out." When he saw that Fengju had given him her undivided attention, he added, "Recently, as I was sorting through the soul registry, I detected a soul from some strange place. I went to check it out and found that it was a soul with neither a previous existence nor a subsequent existence. It did not come from reincarnation and it won't be reborn after death. This sort of soul that is born without going through reincarnation can only be created by the gods, and in this world, the number of those who can create such souls are far and few between. Among the gods, and in addition to me, there is only Elder Yunzhuang from Taichan Palace. A few years ago, I heard because Daijun had wanted to understand the 8 bitternesses of a human's life, he had sought to join the mortal realm. Although according to Siming's Book of Fates, Daijun won't be reincarnating to the mortal realm until 30 years later, it is rumored that he had been retreating to Taichan Palace in all these years. However, during his retreat, he had ordered Elder Yunzhuang to create a soul from his shadow and send it to the mortal world for some experience. It wasn't a bad idea. There shouldn't be any trouble." At this point in the story, Syegoku felt his mouth getting dry, hence he lifted his flask and took another swig. Daijun concealed this matter from everyone. "I assume it's extremely confidential. I've considered for a long time before telling you. Do you know why?" The scaly sunset had diffused. A hazy half-moon pulled up on the mountaintop. Fengju lay down, looked to the misty sky and laughed, "So that you can swindle another jar of wine from me." Syegoku gave her a glance and shook his flask. "What can I possibly do in front of you? Do you have anything I don't already know? When we drank together 7 years ago, didn't you say in your drunkenness that Daijun had saved you on Mount Kainyo? You thought to pay him back by saving him in the wicked lotus sphere, but in the end you were saved by him and was indebted yet again. You said that sooner or later, you would need to find an opportunity to repay him. In my opinion, this is your opportunity. Compared to Daijun, his shadow might even be better. For you to come back to Taichan Palace and see him again would be a bit difficult for you, wouldn't it?" Fengju closed her eyes and said, "You're different today. You're babbling." She paused, then added, "You used to say that these heartbreaks will naturally fade away after a long time. But that was wrong, you know." Syegoku lowered his gaze to her. "Oh? How so?" In the night wind, Fengju covered her eyes as she replied, "It's been 10 years, but I still haven't forgotten any of those sad things. Whenever I think of them, my heart breaks the same as it did back then." Syegoku also lay down and gazed to the misty night sky. "That's because it's still not long enough." Fengju turned to look at him. "To be honest, I have also thought of the good times. I didn't tell you that Daijun had built a hexagonal pavilion for me to keep cool, given me roasted yams, made me sweet and sour fish, and even bandaged my wounds for me. And what else? What other things has he done for you?" Fengju stuttered, he also, momentarily not knowing what to say. She turned her head away, then at length said, "He had saved me." Syegoku lightly said, "Saving you took little effort. Under that situation, His Majesty would lend a helping hand no matter who it was." He sighed, "The good memories of him are only so little?" Fengju, "Then how many bad memories were there?" Fengju gazed to the moon. "Bad memories? Would you like to hear some of the ridiculous things I've done?" After a stretch of silence, she started, "Well, there was once when I altered a dagger blueprint belonging to Lord Liansong. But Jaihun claimed she had fixed it, so I bit her. Daijun scolded me and took her side. At the time, I had run out of the study. At night, for some reason I believed that Daijun would come to apologize because he had wrongly accused me, and sincerely worried that he wouldn't be able to find me. For that reason, I deliberately curled up in his chamber's doorway the entire night. Isn't that ridiculous? Then, did he come to look for you?" Fengju did not reply right away. After a long time, she said, "No, he stayed in the room to paint with Jaihun." The moon gradually climbed over the mountaintop. A few fireflies were gathering under the wishing tree. Syegoku asked, "What happened afterward?" Fengju unconsciously replied, "Afterward." She fell into silence for a while, then continued, "Afterward, Jaihun was with him. Although I was wronged, I still really wanted to be with him. You know that all I wanted was to stay by his side, but I just couldn't find any opportunity. Later on, I scratched Jaihun and he had me locked away. Zonglin felt sorry for me, so he let me out for some sun. But I came across Jaihun's pet, Suoying. It hurt me, then I accidentally fell into the river and was rescued by Siming. In the end, he married Jaihun and I left Zhukongtian." She mumbled, "They're all very boring things. I'm sure you're tired listening to it." Syegoku frowned. "He didn't say anything else to you afterward? And you just left Zhukongtian like that?" Fengju whispered absently, Yes." She watched the sky through the cracks between her fingers as she said, "Siming said my feelings for Daijun were already as deep as the sea, but for what it's worth, I still don't really know what love is. Even though I had liked him no matter what, compared to his supreme eminence, if you asked me what I wanted, I would rather have him not be so great. I just wished he didn't live in Taichan Palace and that he wasn't the king. That way, only I would see his good points, only I would like him. I'd treat him very, very well. Ji once said she'd been with Daijun since her childhood and that my feelings for him couldn't compare to hers. I know, too, that there are many who like him. But if we are just talking about our feelings for him, then I believe I was the one who loved him the most. Syegoku sighed. He never knew your feelings in those days, and perhaps will never know the rest of his life. Weren't you sad that he was indifferent to you? Fengju murmured, how could I not be? But I became a pet so that I could be with him. It was only natural to be treated as a pet. That was how it was for pets. Sometimes we are loved, sometimes we are not. His indifference toward me did make me a bit sad. Maybe it was because I didn't see myself as a pet deep down inside after all. You have humbled yourself enough in front of him, Syegoku replied, shaking his head. For him, you abandoned your precious fur, your respected station, and your family and friends. If you were repaying a favor, these have been enough. Fengju closed her eyes. Forget those. They were only my yearnings, they can't be mistaken for gratitude. A long while later, she added, you're right, it would be a good opportunity if the Daijun in the lower realm is a shadow. Since Daijun wanted to conceal this matter from the immortals, I shouldn't have knowledge that he is in that world as well. If you don't mind, please make a soul out of my shadow and let it reborn where he is. This time, I hope that my shadow can properly repay him for me, save him whenever he is in danger, help him get whatever he wants. Syegoku reached for the wine flask. Help him get whatever he wants. What if he doesn't get what he wants, and this repayment is still unsuccessful? Fengju gazed to the moonlight on the distant mountains and replied, didn't you say Daijun himself will be reborn into the mortal realm in 30 years? If it's still unsuccessful this time, I'll go and beg Siming when that time comes. I'll ask him where Daijun has reincarnated to. She softly said, in 30 years when I see him again, I believe I won't be as useless as I am now. Syegoku drank some wine and warmly said, all right, give me half of your shadow. Regardless of whether this favor is repaid or not, I'll bring news back to you. Hazy moonlight and shadows of birds. The nebulous scene in the glass turned into a clear blue sky as Arania was welcomed into the world in Fanyan Valley. Subsequent events displayed one by one in the mirror, all the way until Arania's soul flew from the Sicing riverside, its parent shadow returning to Syegoku's hand in the underworld. Chen Ye staggered away from the pavilion. Sumoy didn't stop him, neither did he ask where he was going. Chen Ye was a smart man. Presumably, he had guessed he was Daijun's shadow and realized Arania was Fengju's. Two shadows. Their lives had been nothing more than someone else's expendable pastime. Anyone who had been told such a thing would be devastated. Moreover, as Daijun said, Arania wouldn't be coming back. Why she fell in love with Chen Ye, why she saved him, why she always tried her best to help him get whatever it was he wanted, Sumoy finally understood. Because she came into the world for him, her life was fated to be his. He didn't know what Chen Ye was thinking when he dazedly left the pavilion. He seemed so broken that he could not bear to ask. Daijun also didn't stop Chen Ye from leaving. Instead, he just remained staring into the looking glass as though he didn't even notice him. Daijun was frowning. Sumoy wasn't sure whether there was sadness in his expression. He had never seen Daijun being this way before. It was only a mirror, nothing but a dead thing, Syemoy thought, but it had made everyone so woeful. A moment later, Syegoku emerged on the mirror's surface, again visiting King Kaiu. He sat by the Wangsheng shore as he drank with Fengju. In the cool breeze, Fengju poured some wine and said, "Did my shadow fulfill her duties? Was she able to help Daijun's shadow get what he wanted?" Syegoku received the cup from her and sighed, "No." To the day she died, she still didn't know what it was he most wanted. This repayment didn't have the ending we were hoping for. She's dead? Does this mean the repayment also failed? It seems I will have to find a good day to go beg Siming. Syegoku drank down his cup. He poured himself another and said to her, "Won't it be hard on you to see Daijun again?" As flowers fluttered down, a blossom fell to Fengju's fingertips. She lowered her head and softly smiled. After a long time, things such as heartbreaks will naturally fade away. I didn't believe you before, but this time I think you're right. By the time we meet in the mortal realm, it will only be for repayment. Then perhaps we'll meet again one day in heaven at some banquet or other. He'll be the revered deity who rarely comes to parties, and I'll still be Fengju of King Kaiu. In his eyes, I'll just be a young queen he is meeting for the first time. What we had between us were simply my once having liked him without his ever knowing." Donghua was greatly affected. She first met him on Mount Qingyao, but the first time he met her was 2,000 years later by the Wangsheng shore. She said they might meet one day at a banquet. She wasn't wrong. They later met at her aunt's wedding where she almost kicked a flower pot onto his head. He had caused her so much grief over the years, but at that time, he couldn't detect anything from her face. She just acted like a young queen meeting him for the first time, smart, lively, and beautiful. The Miehua glass had quieted down for some time, yet Daijun was still at a loss for words. Syemoy called, "Your Majesty." Daijun's eyes were gazing to an unknown place, still to say a thing. Syemoy stepped forward and called to him again, "Your Majesty." Daijun finally recovered. He looked at him for a moment, then asked, "When was the first time you met Xiao Bai?" He took Syemoy by surprise. Fengju's words from within the mirror may have saddened Daijun and called to his mind something that triggered this question. But this question wasn't exactly easy to answer. He met Fengju at High Deity Jian's 10-mile peach orchard, where the two had privately met instead of being introduced properly in the ways of the nobility. If he were to answer truthfully, Daijun might think he had harbored some feelings for her, and that wouldn't be good. If he were to hide the truth, when Daijun learned of it in the future, he might think he hid it because he really did have feelings for Fengju, and that also wouldn't be good. He hesitated for a moment. Feeling that Daijun didn't ask what form they met and only asked about the time, he cautiously replied, "About 1,000 years ago, I just happened to meet Her Highness by chance." "Why are you asking, may I ask?" Donghua's gaze was affixed on Fengju's face, who was sleeping in his arms. He placed his hand onto her flushed sleeping face, knitted his brow, and said, "If she wanted to see you, she could always go to see you. She liked me, wanted to see me, became a servant in Taichan Palace for more than 400 years, but we weren't fated to meet each other even once. In theory, we shouldn't have such a difficult time meeting." Then why was it like that, do you think? Syemoku remembered when Fengju told him this story, she said they were ill-fated. At the time, he didn't take her words very seriously. He always felt that the so-called ill-fated should be like him and Aranya. He had feelings for her but she did not for him. However, neither Fengju nor Daijun was married. Moreover, they had feelings for each other. It just so happened life was full of unpredictabilities, and there had been some miscues along the way. How could that be called ill-fated? Daijun's sudden question led to some thinking of his own. He tactfully answered him, "Her Highness once said she had no fate with your Majesty. But I think it's only because Her Highness was having a hard time, hence she was looking for an excuse to give up, but it's not true." Dong Hua lifted his left hand and made a seal. Xiao Bai is right. Perhaps it is indeed bad fate at play. Suddenly, a gust kicked up from the ground. The green tiles on the pavilion rang continuously. Protected within Daijun's hold, Fengju still showed no signs of waking up. The moon in the sky unexpectedly moved closer. In front of it lay a boulder on which an elderly fairy with grey hair and beard was leaning. This was the Diaz who, lit shaking the universe, sorcery. This world could easily collapse if someone who fell into it resorted to strong magic. With this said, the Diaz who sorcery was one of the most powerful magics. This mirror, if broken, could easily be repaired. But if they were to fall into danger, one couldn't say for sure what would happen. Syemoku strode forward. "You must not use this sorcery. The ground has started to quake around here. Your Majesty, please calm down." The elderly fairy by the boulder benevolently said, "From what I see, His Majesty is much calmer than you, my dear sir. Perhaps because you are in there, you haven't discovered that this world has already started to collapse? If His Majesty didn't use the Diazu sorcery and call me here to inquire after divine will, this dream still wouldn't hold out much longer." Syemoku was astounded. The elderly fairy greeted Dong Hua and said, "After guarding the Stone of Destiny for tens of thousands of years, I did not think the first person to call me to inquire after heaven's will would be your Majesty. Since creation rests in your hands, pardon my ignorance, what is it that you want to inquire from the Stone of Destiny that you did not hesitate to use the Diazu sorcery to call me here even though you aren't one to be puzzled about heaven's will?" The Stone of Destiny in front of the moon enlarged with the words of the elderly fairy. Shades of writing were visible on it. Dong Hua unhurriedly said, "What does the Stone of Destiny say about the fate between Fengju of King Kaiyu and me?" Syemoku was visibly surprised. The elderly fairy was also surprised. "The Stone of Destiny is engraved with immortals' destinies. I'm sure you know that although destiny is written down, it wasn't written so that people would know about it. If it is let known, there is bound to be changes. Even if I let you know how the relationship between you and that little princess is engraved on the Stone of Destiny, as soon as tomorrow, what is engraved will no longer be the same as it is today. Some might change for the better, some might change for the worse. What would you do if your thread of fate with her worsened after you asked? In my humble opinion, it would better, if you didn't ask." The Diazu sorcery suddenly set off interminable wind. Amidst the gusts, Dong Hua lightly said, "What can be worse than my lack of fate with the King Kaiyu Queen?" The elderly fairy's countenance altered. But in just a flash, he sighed, "Your guess is correct. Your Majesty and the young lady of King Kaiu originally did not have even an ounce of fate. Although her persistence toward you is very touching, fate is beyond the control of man. According to the original carvings on the Stone of Destiny, Her Highness's blind infatuation shall be buried under ice and snow, where her pain and sufferings shall melt away like nothing more than water flowing east. However, he considered for a moment before saying, 300 years ago, when your Majesty sent your shadow to the lower realm, the Stone of Destiny introduced a change. Daijun lowered his voice. Go on. The elderly fairy stroked his beard. When your shadow came to the lower realm, Her Highness also sent her shadow to follow you there. Such persistence is rare, and I wonder if it moved the heavens. After Her Highness's shadow descended the lower realm, the Stone of Destiny actually created a fate for it. Destiny was written for this shadow's origin to begin in a snake pit. The rescued shall repay with her life, and her savior shall see his wish fulfilled. While it wasn't lined with roses, there wasn't to be any big obstacle. They were to have a life of happiness. The elderly fairy gave a helpless glance at Sumoy. But this dear friend had unwittingly stuck his foot in the middle of it all and unfortunately jumbled up a few details. Sure enough, it caused a ripple effect. In the end, what fate they had become undone. It was a shame, it really was. Sumoy's complexion turned ashen. Have I inadvertently become a sinner? The elderly fairy said, there are two sides to every coin, so you should not generalize. It might be a sin from this view, but it could very well be merit from another view. There is no need to give yourself grief. If we are only speaking of this matter, His Majesty must actually thank you. He sighed, those two have an unfinished fate, yet shadows don't have afterlives. That being the case, the Stone of Destiny laid this stretch of unfinished fate onto your Majesty and the young princess. This was the only reason why you could properly meet each other. If it hadn't been for this, you would have been destined to never cross paths with one another. At this point, he hesitated before saying, in truth, your Majesty and the young princess are now considered to be destined. But since your Majesty so inquired, tomorrow the Stone of Destiny will undoubtedly be rewritten. It isn't within my ability to know whether or not your Majesty and the young princess is fated from now on. I just feel that it would be such a pity if this already fragile fate was destroyed because your Majesty had asked to know about it. So what if destiny says we're fated, and so what if it says we're not? Donghua coldly replied. I've never feared destiny, and I certainly don't need its charity. Flustered, the elderly fairy placed his palms together and said, I've heard your Majesty has become increasingly indifferent ever since you sought seclusion from the world. But I've witnessed today that you are still the same master we once knew. I apologize that my words have crossed boundary, but I am very pleased to see you like this. When the elderly fairy bid farewell, rooftops suddenly shook violently as green tiles fell to the ground and wood and stones came tumbling down. Sumoy supported a column while saying to Donghua, is this caused by the Daesu sorcery? Daijun raised his hand to remove the Kanghe blade that was still drilled into the column. It's Chen yet. The air as breezy, the moon as silver as before, but under the breezy moonlit sky, the world created by Chen Ye was starting to move. Mountains were crumbling, water was changing its course. All around them were wails and cries. These were the signs that this world would soon be collapsing. The dream's master, Chen Yat, had lost his will to live. This world thus started its collapse. When they found Chen Ye by the Syegoku riverside, sure enough, he was already submerged underwater. The usually surging Syegoku was as still as glass. Its turbid water had also turned clear. Reflected on the riverbed was the black-robed archmage's handsome face, looking ever peaceful as though there had never been pain to trouble him. Syemoy could not say whether he felt sympathetic or guilty toward Chen Yat. He couldn't believe a romance could accidentally fall through like this. They had clearly been happy, but were made to separate at opposite ends of the world. First they were separated in life, then they were separated in death. People say the most painful thing is a love where you cannot be together in life and cannot meet in death. But that was still not it. The worst grief is when you clearly loved her but she never even knew to the day she died, and you could no longer let her know. Syemoy raised his voice. I've always wondered. If Chen Ye had made this world, why did he still save Junyo and let the tragedy occur as before? Saving Junyo would force King Hua to betray Shang Jun. Once Shang Jun died, he probably wanted to bring Aranya onto the throne. In her past life, Aranya died because she didn't have any power. He probably wanted to give her this so that even if he wasn't around, she would still be protected. Syemoy was dumbfounded. By the time he recovered, he saw Dai Jun stroking Fengju's forehead, a silvery glow pooling at his fingertips. Syemoy blurted, "This is..." Although Xiao Bai had consumed Aranya's essences Chen Ye so laboriously collected, it's not really difficult to separate them out. As he spoke, he parted the river surface into rising blue waves. The white glow slowly made its way into Chen Yi's body. When the waves closed up, the black-attired mage could not be seen at the bottom anymore. Instead, from the water grew a twin four-season tree, tall and dense with flowers. Dong Hua lifted his hand. The four-season tree turned into a sapling and fell into his palm. After studying it for a moment, he handed it to Syemoy and said, "After we get out of here, give it to Zai so it can be planted in Qinan Palace." Syemoy took the sapling and cautiously said, "Since Chen Ye is dead, his soul will naturally return as your shadow. Or could it be that you?" Dong Hua nodded. "I've sealed it inside this tree." He paused. "I've also sealed that one half of Xiao Bai's shadow which turned into Aranya in here. The two of them were supposed to turn into ashes once they were dead, but if the world always played by the rules, then it wouldn't be so interesting anymore. I'm now sealing them here. After millions of years, whether this will lead to some good fortune will have to depend on providence." Behind them suddenly exploded in flames. Then something sounding like broken glass started to crack. The Kanghe sword left its scabbard and instantly turned into innumerable images, forming a solid force field that firmly protected the three people inside. A deafening crack tore across the sky. By the time they opened their eyes, they were back at Jiayu Spring in Fanyan Valley. On the hollow lake surrounded by walls of water, Zhukongtian's third prince turned around from the chess table and greeted them from above. "Hey, the three heroes have finally come back." He smiled across the chess table. "They came back unscathed. I've won fair and square. Haha, pay up, pay up." On the chess table, a sleepy head at once jerked up, thereby revealing an exquisite jade-like face. He looked to the three heroes who had returned safely, then immediately pointed in anger, What's wrong with Xiaoju? Why is Ice Face walking out on his feet but Xiaoju is brought out sideways? I knew I was wise. I've always said Ice Face isn't as honorable as I am. He has absolutely no grasp of gallantry. Sumoy disorientedly watched the two on the lake and said, I'm sure sparring is fun and everything, but can you two temporarily take a break and find us a place to crash first? End of chapter 16.